What's up guys, MikeCoco back here, bringing you guys a new video on floor 5 of Ruins slash Exploration. This is going to be a guide slash tutorial for floor 5, and before I start anything off, I do want to say that I will be using the mythic hero that we received during the ARC promotion event. So if you weren't active during that time, it may still be difficult for you to complete floor 5 because it is quite troublesome and the mythic heroes just provide a lot more utility. I do believe it is possible to complete floor 5 without any mythic heroes and being solely free to play, but it will require lots of resources and very good gear. Um, so do know that this tutorial will take advantage of that mythic hero. uh, for completely free players that don't have that mythic hero, nor do they have any costumes that are specific to the shop, like Ella's costume, or I don't know, probably someone else that I can't think of right now. Um, I've been able to get to 5-8 with this setup, but not past that because 5-8 is considered the bottleneck for floor 5. It kind of tells you whether or not you can successfully complete the floor. So besides that, I'm just gonna get started with the tutorial. So for my exploration team, what I'm using right now is this setup, which is Michael, Lasida, Claire, uh, Ione, and Juri. So I'm gonna go a little bit into the formation before we start off just the auto portion. So explore floor 5 or ruins floor 5. The main components for the bosses are that they have attack up, provided from the Morgiana mobs. They have defense buff from also from one of the Morgiana mobs, and the bosses actually vary between single hit and a 3x3 or the entire board essentially. And the last one are wait no, the last one is the white beasts that attack. Those are just stray mobs, so you don't have to worry too much about that. Now the main things I want to focus on are the buffs and the area of effect of the bosses. So when you're running the bosses, certain bosses will have a single target, and other bosses will hit the entire board. So if you're fighting a boss that has a single target, i.e., they hit only a specific target, you're going to be generating less fury. So for those floors, I would highly recommend bringing in a single target Fury Thief. And for the floors that hit the entire board, hit the entire 3x3 square, you're going to be generating more Fury. So you can probably take out your single target Fury Thief and put in a stronger multi target Fury Thief. And the way to get around the attack buffs from the boss is to simply use a dispeller. Now, the most common one is Juri with a costume. However, you do have access to Remi with costume if you have her, and you also have access to Tehu if you picked Tehu and have his costume. And that's pretty much it. I would not suggest bringing in Dark Prophet Sivio solely for the spell because it costs way too much fury and it's not going to be worth it. In that case, you're better off just trying to power through the floor as fast as possible. Because if you can power through the floor within 3 to 4 turns, the attack buff won't hit you that hard, essentially. So you can kind of tank your way through the first 3 to 4 turns and you can still survive. But if it takes any more turns after that, the attack buff will have to be removed. Otherwise, your heroes will die very quickly. So this is the setup I'm using right now. It is essentially a powering through an extremely offensive base setup. And the reason why is because the gear I've set up on my Michael is for him to hit around 100 mil per turn when he procs with his spear. And every single boss, except I think the last boss, has around 300 mil damage. So essentially, it takes around 3 to 4 turns for my entire team to set up the kill. And because you have a bunch of active procs, you can technically generate Fury while attacking. So that's the reason why I don't have a single target Fury Thief. Now, prior to being able to successfully clear this, I was using a setup more similar to this. So I still had Michael, and I alternated between um, the multi-target Fury Thief, Claire, and Khalid, which was the single-target Fury Thief. Now, to go into the team formation, essentially every team you bring into floor 5 of Explore should have one of the following. All right, let me just set this up. So something like what was it? No, I had Claire in this setup, and I think it was like this. So essentially, the common pattern between these three teams is that you need your debuffer or your dispeller actually, because like I said before, the attack buff does get extremely hard to deal with on later turns. So you definitely want to get rid of that buff, and it's also because if you don't kill the Morgianas, they will continuously buff the boss. So because there's no way to specifically target those Morgianas, it's better if you always have your dispeller in your team ready to go at any moment. So that's why Jury is very common. Now, then you have Michael, specifically in my team, I have Michael, and he pretty much draws aggro. That's all he does, and he deals damage. He takes the place of Lucida because Lucida requires a crit buff, rather, in order to deal significant damage, and Michael is self-sufficient. He provides his own attack buff and his own crit buff, if you have his costume at least. So he does deal lots of damage. I currently have a 3x3 Dispel Spear on him at level 100 and level 12. What am I saying? Level 12. Now, level 15 is when the active becomes a guaranteed hit, but at level 12, it's almost guaranteed. It's like 12 out of 15. You can calculate the probability of that, but it's extremely high, and that's pretty much it. This setup alone, or the spear alone, deals the majority of the damage. Now, I also have Claire, which is simply just to provide the grudge ability. The reason why is and also to kind of function as a Fury Thief, but she doesn't steal Fury that well, considering she's a multi-target Fury Thief and you're hitting a single target, which is the boss. So you can replace this with pretty much any other hero that has grudge. And you have your cleanser. The cleanser is also very important. Not extremely important in some of the battles, but especially important for floors 5-8, 5-9, and I think one of the earlier floors, because one of the bosses, or those three bosses, they control the entire 3x3 square, so they either apply a silence or like a charm or like a stun or something like that, or like a fury, double fury or something. So you definitely want to get rid of that, and that's the reason why you have a cleanser. Now, for these, for this team, I did not include the cleanser because this team is based on the fact that you have a single target. And so if you're only a single target is getting hit, then it doesn't really matter too much if they're controlled, because specifically in this case, Michael will draw all the aggro, and so um, whether or not he goes doesn't really matter, because his shield tanks a lot of damage, and he also has his Phoenix ability. So I don't really care whether or not he uses his skill, because if he gets stunned or controlled, it doesn't matter. I'll just use Lucida as my backup damage dealer and whittle away at the boss's health. And if he doesn't get stunned, well, that's fine too. He'll just finish the boss even faster. So that's the reason why I don't have a cleanser in this formation. But in the boss battles that have area of effect controls, like 5-8, you definitely want to bring in a cleanser, or else you're going to have a lot of problems to deal with. So that's essentially it. Now I'm going to stop talking about formation because I can commentate over this while I'm doing Explore. So I'm going to put it on non-quick battle just to show you guys what happens. So specifically for the first floor, it's a single target. So in this case, you can bring in Khalid instead, because again, you have a single target to deal with, and the boss only hits a single target, so you're gonna be short on Fury. Now, the two Morgianas you see here, those are the ones that provide the buffs to the boss. And the reason why the formation is set up like this is because I know that or at least specifically on the single target bosses, they're gonna target Michael because of his unique aggro drawing ability. And I think none of the bosses actually hit in a row, which is why I have Lucida and Claire set up in the same row, and not in what is it, your typical checkerboard formation. So you can probably also use the checkerboard formation, but the only reason why I'm using or where I put Lucida and Claire in the same row is because I also have Ione, and I gave her a level 12 dispel staff as well. And so that way, if I put them next to each other, I have the potential ability to cleanse Claire as well as cleansing Michael in case Michael gets stunned. That way I do have a backup plan. And Ione is extremely useful in this case because if she doesn't have the ability to use her skill, then at level 12 it's almost guaranteed that her normal hit will proc the dispel and Michael will get cleansed. So essentially, Michael and Ione both cleanse each other. If either of them gets controlled by a stunned or a silence, the other will provide the cleanse ability using the active on the spell or on the spear slash staff. Now, this is one of the first bosses, the earlier bosses that provide that have the control ability, the silence in a 3x3. Now, it's not a guaranteed silence, it's a chance silence, so that's why you only saw Michael get silenced there. And that's essentially it for this floor. The main focus is simply to get rid of the attack buffs and have a cleanse. So that's the reason why you definitely want a dispel weapon on more than one hero. If I were to bring in Khalid in this case, and this hero, there's one specific boss that I forgot that actually hits in a row, but because he hits in single target, he deals quite low damage in this case. And also because Michael's spear does so much damage, it doesn't really matter. But in this formation, I would go back to using a checkerboard where you have Lucida and Claire pushed up against there. That way, Michael will take all the damage and none of your other heroes will get hit. And yeah, so what I was saying before was if you're using Khalid instead for those specific single target bosses, I would also recommend you to bring in or at least give him a dispel sword. So in case that either you don't have enough fury, you can at least provide a small cleanse in case Michael is, controlled, or if your fury thief like Khalid is also controlled via silence or charm, he can still provide a cleanse for the other heroes on your team. And yep, that's pretty much it for floor 5. That's all I have to say. And in this case, well, with the introduction of S2 gear, things have been a lot easier because damage has been increased and your HP has also been increased, your defense has been increased. Typically speaking, I would definitely recommend alternating between floors. So I'll put it in the description below, but you can kind of remember which bosses are single target or AoE. So I remember this specific boss is single target, so it will definitely target Michael. And this is the one that provides the stun, I think. So it's a guaranteed stun on a specific target. And so for this one, I would try to bring in a dispeller in case you're noticing that your formation isn't working, because I have been noticing prior that sometimes not bringing a dispeller into this specific floor, 5-6, has been a problem because my Michael would always be stunned and Lucida would just never deal enough damage to get past the number of turns required. So yeah, that's it. The more interesting and fun part comes in 5-8, where you have Dimitra. But I will talk about the other possibilities if you aren't running Michael. If you have Remi, I think Remi would probably be the better choice or at least a suitable alternative if you did not pick Michael from your arc box. And the reason is, if you have Remi, you can kind of get away without using Jury if you have her costume. And that's essentially it, because if you have Remi with costume, you can essentially remove 2 heroes from this formation. You can remove both Jiri and Ione, and that leaves you with 3 spaces for damage dealers, or a damage dealer, a crit buffer, and a Fury Thief, which is pretty much all you need. So 5-8, this is the bottleneck floor, and the reason why is because the Mitra is extremely powerful, and also because she provides a 3x3 guaranteed silence. So after this turn, everyone on my side will get silenced. And that is the reason why I recommend bringing a dispel active weapon for situations like this. So as you can see here, Michael's able to cleanse because Ione has been able to cleanse herself. And so that's pretty much it. Now in this case, actually, this looks pretty bad because both Lucida and Claire have died. And that's probably not good. Surprisingly, the one time where I die, I'm actually recording this. But as you saw there, I did not remove the attack buff because Jury was silenced. So you definitely do want to change up your initiatives after to ensure that they will actually remove that attack buff. Those white beasts, even though they're only hitting with normal attacks, when they have the attack buff applied, they deal a lot of damage. So you do want to be careful about that. So let's see if it happens again. Hopefully it doesn't. And actually in this case, it might be better. Yeah, so now I remember the reason why it didn't happen before is because those white beasts actually have the normal attack actually hits in a row. So back to what I was saying before about formation, you probably actually do want to use a checkerboard formation rather than using the row formation that I had set up there, or specifically for that floor, because it's not worth losing those 2 heroes just to cleanse one of them with Ione's skill. And I think with Ione's myth skill, you can also improve the activation chance for staff heroes, which does mean that you'd only need to get it to, I think, level 13 for it to be a guaranteed proc, because it increases activation chance by 20%. And if you give them a level 12, well, you need to do a little bit of math. I don't know what 12 out of 15 is in percentage, but I think it's probably closer to 85, maybe 80%. So with that 20% increase, with the 20% increase from her myth skill, it's pretty much a guaranteed dispel as long as she doesn't get stunned herself. And okay, so that's it for so we got to do 5-9. 5-9 is somewhat similar to 5-8, but you don't have the silence, which is a lot easier to deal with. And I feel as if 5-9 hits less hard than 5-8, although that might just be me. So if you didn't pick Michael, Remi with costume is definitely a way to go. Yeah, like I said before, all you need is you have 3 spaces left for heroes, and you have a space for a damage healer, a Fury Thief, and a crit buffer, and that's all you need. If you pick Tehu, he can act as your dispeller in that case, but you might have some trouble because he doesn't deal too much damage in PvE, so that might be a problem. And the other common choice I think was Gabriel. Gabriel was also fairly common. Gabriel is a good pick because his Fury stealing starts at 100, or it becomes 100 Fury in PvE because of his Fury reduction skill. So in that case, you can use him as Grudge. So essentially, he becomes a better version of Claire. And so you may not need to run a single target Fury Thief in that case if you're using Gabriel. And he also acts as a damage dealer with his costume, because he performs similar damage to Lucida. But you will still need a dispeller and a cleanser. So having if you have Gabriel, he may still cause a little bit of trouble. Now this boss is a little bit easier, only because the boss only hits in I think in a column, I believe. So if your Michael does get aggroed, the boss is only gonna focus on Michael, so it's not gonna deal too much damage, which is completely fine. And this is the only boss where it takes more than 3 turns to kill, because he has I think 600,000 or 600 million rather HP, so it does take quite a while. But Michael's ability does allow him to survive a long time, and because of all the active procs going on, you are able to generate Fury quite decently. Um, so I would definitely say Michael is one of the better suited heroes for Explorer, simply because he doesn't need Fury to deal huge amounts of damage. No other hero right now can provide that kind of damage with basically 0 Fury cost. Or if we split the 200 Fury among 3 turns, it's 200 Fury divided by 3 turns, which is like 70 something Fury, which is absolutely amazing for damage per Fury cost. And yeah, that's pretty much it for Explorer. And I'm trying to think of what other mythic heroes, uh, what other heroes you can use in place of Michael. I did have a thought of using Zhao Yun instead of Khalid, but I haven't been able to test him because my Zhao is not highly ranked, so he just dies way too early. But because his skill does Steel Fury turn by turn, I suspect that he does pretty decently in terms of Fury stealing, um, compared to other multi-target Fury thieves like Claire or um, I don't know what other multi-target Fury thieves people typically run. And I think that's probably it. Some people picked Sarah. Sarah is a little bit more difficult to use because she's essentially a worse version of Claire in PvE because, or at least in Explore, because she has a very high Fury cost. And hmm, I think yeah, a lot of people picked Kemal, and Kemal is decent, I would say, only because she hits in a row and column, so her damage is a bit better, but she's still 250 Fury, and the stun doesn't really help too much. But the mythic skill ability does help. But in any case, Kemal, you might still have problems if you have Kemal. You will have to definitely still use a combination of Jiri and Ione to get your cleanse and your dispel working. Uh, and you may not need to use a crit buffer in that case because of Kemal's sheer damage, but a Fury Thief is definitely necessary, and I would highly suggest running a Fury Thief in every single formation you put Kemal in, just because she's at 250 Fury, and even though it only sounds like 50 more Fury, it can often determine whether or not you kill the boss or not. Raguel is fairly similar to Gabriel, I would say, except without the Fury Steel aspect, so you'll probably also have a harder time with Raguel. Saint Ione actually does fairly well against against these bosses in Explore because her myth skill does provide healing for 3 turns. So what it means is that you don't have to actually run a healer if you're confident that you can deal enough damage in those first 3 turns and just completely wipe away the boss, because you won't need any damage that is done to you will automatically be healed. And also because her skill is very good, she also acts as dispeller, and she also acts as support. So it does mean that you can get rid of Jury in this case, or replace Jury with Saint Ione, and you may not be able to. You still need a cleanser, but it does mean that if you're using Saint Ione, you probably want to focus on a more offensive based setup. So definitely, and also because she provides crit up, it means that you can put in 2 damage dealers rather than just 1, and bring in probably a Fury Thief. You may not even need that Fury Thief, depending on how much Fury you're using, because active procs can generate Fury by itself. So I think that is pretty much it for the Explore floor 5. There's not much else to cover, I think. If I'm forgetting anything. And yeah, so essentially, a recap is floor 5, you want your dispeller. Any dispeller will do, as long as you're not 300 Fury. You want your cleanser, generally speaking, to have a dispel weapon, because the cleanser's role is not really meant to deal damage. They're solely there to cleanse and prevent your heroes from getting stunned. So definitely, if you can, give them a very high level active white ring. You know, completely forget about using rank 6 or S2 rings. If you have like a level 70 legendary ring that's level 10 active, just give it to them. That's what I'm doing right now, because if their role is a cleanser, I don't need them to deal any damage at all. So I only need them to cleanse, so I'll just give them as much support as needed in order for them to cleanse. And get them that dispel weapon, like I said before. And you need Fury Thief. Now, depending on the floor, you'll want either a multi-target or a single target. Obviously, the multi-target deals more damage, but against the single-target bosses, you'll want the single-target Fury Thief, because otherwise you won't get enough Fury. If you have Husky, definitely use Husky, because Husky provides grudge ability and also deals decent damage, I would say. But also because he steals single target only, so he steals a lot of Fury, and he starts off with grudge, which is really good. And your damage dealer, it can be any damage dealer. I would actually say Cromwell is probably better suited now than Lucida is. Or actually no, because Lucida is still suited for PvE with damage done to bosses. So you can probably sub in Cromwell for Lucida if she does die. And depending on which mythic hero you chose, your mythic hero. If you're running Michael, I highly recommend running Grudge, because that way, I would show the initiative anyway. Um, you definitely want, it should be 100. You definitely want Claire to provide the Grudge ability so that Michael can provide the Fury up, or not provide the Fury. You want, let me rephrase that. You want Claire to have Grudge so that Michael can shield on the first turn and also draw aggro away from your other heroes. That way, Michael takes all the damage and your other heroes are safe. And yeah, everything else is kind of intuitive based on initiative, because you just essentially you want Michael as your main damage dealer, so he always goes first. Claire for Fury stealing, Lucida for kind of secondary damage, and Ione and Juri they're last, because typically speaking, if they're stunned or if they're yeah, pretty much if they're stunned, I would rather them cleanse at the end and dispel at the end. Now, Juri, you can move her initiative higher depending on whether or not you run out of Fury, because sometimes it is better to deal a little bit less damage. So have Michael or have Lucida not use their skill, but instead dispel the buff away from the boss, so you survive one more turn. So in some cases that is probably better. So you should definitely watch your initiatives. But other than that, I think that's pretty much it for floor 5. And floor 6 is it's a video for another day, because floor 6 is somewhat similar to floor 5, except the bosses deal much or a lot more damage, so you definitely need shielding heroes in that case, and that's a totally different meta to deal with. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Peace.